On the 1st of June, the Security Service of Ukraine, as part of Operation Spiderweb, conducted an unprecedented attack on Russian strategic aviation bases, in an action that could serve as a scenario for Hollywood productions. Cheap drones controlled via 4G networks, placed on rooftops of small houses, on tracks that opened remotely. And all of that prepared in a warehouse in Chelyabinsk, rented for $4,500, located near the FSB headquarters in that very city. The result? At least a dozen strategic bombers destroyed, aircraft that Russia hasn't produced for 30 years, as well as possibly another AWACS reconnaissance aircraft, which individually represents one of the most valuable equipment targets in the entire inventory of the Russian Federation armed forces. Some Russian meal bloggers have begun calling the action Russia's Pearl Harbor. But let's take this step by step. Welcome to the special report. Global conflicts like that between Russia and Ukraine create significant market volatility, affecting commodity prices, international trade, and investment landscapes. During periods of geopolitical uncertainty, many investors find it challenging to make informed financial decisions. By investing, you can participate in economic development or target specific sectors and companies that may benefit from changing global dynamics. XTB Investing app, the partner of this episode, offers everything you need to effectively manage your finances. A wide range of products with access to over 4,500 shares and ETFs from around the world, which you can buy without commission up to a monthly turnover of 100,000 euros. Analysis and market commentary from experts, and an intuitive platform with dozens of tools will help you navigate volatile markets. And if you feel you lack crucial knowledge, at XTB you will also find a free educational package. Check out the XTB offer by clicking on the link in the description. By doing so, you support the development of the channel. Remember that investing involves risk. The Ukrainian Security Service reportedly began work on the operation as early as November 2023. And due to its strategic importance, it was directly overseen by President Zelenskyy. The Ukrainians came up with the idea of building small, modular container houses that would fit on the truck trailers and could be transported in Russia. The ingenious plan involved arranging the space under the roof covering in such a way that even several dozen FPV drones could be hidden there. The roof itself was designed to open remotely when the Ukrainians began their attack. The drones and explosive charges were smuggled into Russia, most likely from Kazakhstan territory. We can see the whole setup in the photos released by the SSU. The heart of the operation was a 600-500 meters square warehouse located in the Russian city of Chelyabinsk, specifically at Sverdlovsky Tract 28A. How do we know this? Because Russian bloggers have already managed to connect the photos released by the SSU with listings on ad portals. It turns out that the Ukrainians prepared this attack right under the nose of the local FSB, whose headquarters is located just 5 kilometers from this location. All this cost $4,500 per month. That's precisely why the trucks had Chelyabinsk license plates. That's where they departed from. The drivers were ordered by someone called Artyom, a 37-year-old businessman from Murmansk. For example, the houses used in the attack on the Olenia base were transported by Alexander Z, a 55-year-old resident of Chelyabinsk. He received an order to deliver 4 modular houses to the Kola Peninsula. They agreed on the price and he set off. Meanwhile, an unknown contact gave Alexander instructions about stops. The last one was at the Rosneft gas station, near the Olenia base. Similarly, the houses to Irkutsk, Belaya base, were transported by 61-year-old Andrei M. The scheme was repeated in the case of Diagilevo and Ivanovo. All of them were in contact with a certain Artyom. When everything was ready and the drivers arranged, all that remained was to wait for the right moment. And indeed that moment came. According to Russian meal blogger Russian Arms, in the last 2 weeks Russians relocated as many as 40 Tu-22 M3 bombers to Olenia airfield, one of the 2 most heavily hit in Sunday's attack. Additionally, the same was supposed to happen with 20% of all Tu-95 MS bombers. This meant the largest such relocation since the beginning of the war. According to the author, the Kremlin wasn't doing this without purpose, but intended to carry out another, perhaps the largest, missile attack on Ukraine, precisely with the participation of the relocated bombers. The targets would once again be energy, transport, logistical or civilian centers. After the attack, Volodymyr Zelenskyy also confirmed this, saying that Ukrainian intelligence had information about an imminent attack. Satellite images from the day before the attack from the Belaya airbase confirmed the presence of as many as 39 Tu-22 M3 bombers, 30 MiG-31, 7 Tu-160, 6 pieces of Tu-95 MS, 2 pieces of Il-78M, 6 An-26 and 2 pieces of An-12. So when everything was ready and the Russians had completed the relocation of strategic bombers, Zelenskyy gave the green light for action. The trucks with houses drove to the vicinity of 5 key strategic aviation bases of the Russian Federation. These were the bases: Olenia in Murmansk region, Belaya in Irkutsk region, Diaghilevo in Ryazan region, Ivanovo in Ivanovo region, Ukrainka in Amur region, all scattered across the entire territory of the Russian Federation. However, visual evidence, abundant evidence, as we will see shortly, concerns only the first 2 so far. The attacks on Diaghilevo, Ivanovo and Ukrainka were either neutralized by the base's air defense or did not succeed. The Russian MOD claims they were repelled. Or visual evidence will appear in the form of satellite images. We will most likely learn the full accounting of the operation in the coming days and weeks. However, the attack on Olenia and Belaya was sufficient to be very painful for the Russians. When the trucks with improvised payloads approached the vicinity of the bases, FPV drones with charges began flying out from the trailers after the roofs of the houses opened. In this recording, we can see how drones fly out of the house on a truck to the amazement of local residents. Some Russians tried heroically to stop the drones by climbing on the roof and throwing stones at the drones. Yet when the drones left the houses, they began heading toward the airfields and attacking the bombers stationed there. Here we can see burning aircraft at the Olenia base. Here we see attacks on the Belaya base, viewed from the perspective of residents. According to Russian meal bloggers, the attack was conducted by FPV drones controlled via 4G LTE network. Quote, "The bandwidth of modern mobile networks is more than enough to perform such tasks. The FPV drone was controlled via the Andrew Pilot software and hardware solution. The genius of this operation is not in its tech uniqueness. This solution is used by both parties to the conflict, but in the organizational and logistical part, multiplied by total local Russian sloppiness in ensuring security measures," reports Samuel Bendet, citing Russian bloggers. After the completed action, the trucks had programmed self-destruction, which we observe in this recording. Zelenskyy confirmed that all Ukrainian security service members involved in the action safely returned to Ukrainian soil. The result? Truly impressive. According to the Ukrainians, per Zelenskyy's statement, 117 drones used in the operation were supposed to lead to strikes and destruction of 34% of the Russian Federation's strategic cruise missile carriers. Specific speculations even mention 41 aircraft. These are very optimistic assumptions, because at this moment the destruction or serious damage of 14 aircraft has been visually confirmed. 9 pieces of Tu-95, 4 pieces of Tu-22 M3, and 1 An-22. Speculations also concern the destruction of the newest bombers in the Russian fleet, 2 pieces of Tu-160 Blackjack aircraft, as reported by Ukrainian journalist Alexander Kovalenko. Moreover, the Ukrainian infosphere reports the successful destruction of a Russian AWACS, meaning an A-50 aircraft. And this would be individually the biggest blow dealt during this attack, because while the Russians have 70 to 90 bombers in operational use, they are effector carriers, carrying missiles and bombs. Whereas the Kremlin has only 3 or 4 operational AWACS in use, which are like brains of the entire system. So the loss of each additional unit is a huge threat to the Russian Federation armed forces. Nevertheless, we must not be fooled into thinking that the destruction of 14 bombers is just another loss for the Russians. This is a massive blow to one of the pillars of the Russian nuclear triad. So far, the destruction of 15 to 20% of the entire bomber fleet has been visually confirmed, consisting of, as estimated by Tatarigami from Frontelligence, from 70 to 90 bombers like Tu-160, Tu-95M and Tu-22M3 bombers. A fleet that, let's keep in mind, the Russians cannot rebuild, because the entirety of it is Soviet legacy, that Russia currently does not produce. The coming days may provide visual evidence of the destruction of additional assets, and then the count could approach the 34% that Zelenskyy writes about. Then we are talking about a nightmarish humiliation for the Russians. Let's remember that the aerial terror campaign directed at political, energy, health, logistical or residential centers was and is largely carried out using these very bombers, neutralizing the carriers and possibly also the command center in the form of an A-50 is an attack on the very heart of the system. In Russia's 5 largest attacks on Ukraine, most missiles were launched from Tu-95s. No wonder President Volodymyr Zelenskyy was bursting with pride. Quote, Head of the Security Service of Ukraine, Vasyl Maliuk, delivered a report regarding today's operation. An absolutely brilliant result. A result achieved solely by Ukraine. 1 year, 6 months and 9 days from the start of planning to effective execution. Our most long-range operation. Our people involved in preparing the operation were withdrawn from Russian territory in time. I thanked General Maliuk for the success of Ukraine. I instructed the Security Service of Ukraine to inform the public about the details and results of the operation that can be disclosed. Of course, not everything can be revealed at this moment, but these are Ukrainian actions that will undoubtedly be in history books." Unquote. The sentence, "a result achieved solely by Ukraine," is not accidental, because Kyiv deliberately did not inform the Americans or anyone else about the details of the action. It did this because it believed that Washington would simply block it. This testifies to the hermetic nature of the Ukrainian command system, so important in current realities, and to its effectiveness. The Russian reaction was ambiguous. Dmitry Medvedev, in his style, thundered about playing with fire that will end in hell for the Ukrainians. However, the fact is that Russian media were ordered to keep quiet about the topic, somewhat ashamed by the humiliation from their opponent. In conclusion, the Ukrainians carried out a spectacular attack, whose effects are already excellent and can only get better. The attack was carried out on locations respectively 1800 kilometers from Ukraine, Olenia base, and 4000 kilometers from Ukraine, Belaya base. And an attack on the Russian Far East also came close to success. The entire action resembled a Hollywood production scenario, or looking closer, one of the stories from Viktor Suvorov's books. Excellent planning, logistics, execution, and timing. A masterpiece. Moreover, these were not the only acts of sabotage and attacks that residents of the Russian Federation experienced that weekend. Explosions were heard at the Russian Northern Fleet base in Olengorsk, in Murmansk, thus near the Olenia base. It is a base for the Russian Yasen M-class submarines. Additionally, the Ukrainians destroyed 2 important bridges in the Bryansk and Kursk regions. The first exploded during the passage of a Klimovo-Moscow train. 7 people died and 69 were injured. Also in Kursk, an explosion caused a train derailment, but no fatalities were reported, only injuries. It is unknown whether these events were part of Operation Spiderweb, though this is doubtful. All of this took place before another round of peace talks in Turkey. The Ukrainian side's goals are clear. First, unconditional ceasefire. Second, release of prisoners. Third, the return of abducted children. Will the Russians be inclined to make concessions? One might suspect that in light of the humiliating attack, their inclination to concede will be even lower than usual. But realistically, the Kremlin's ability to strike targets in Ukraine has been severely reduced. And this is a capability that the Russian cannot rebuild in a short time. Also, in the dimension of the broader geopolitical situation, the reduction of Russian strategic aviation realistically degrades Russia's power projection status in the region and globally. And looking at the previous successes of Ukrainian services, this will probably not be the last such action that the world will hear about.